It is time for America's Talking, and news clips from across the country and state houses dealing with a variety of issues in Minnesota, with all of the spotlight on the fraud, alleged fraud, and how to tackle that. You have Senator Michael Holstrom and Senator Omar Fattah debating a bill that would allow for lawsuits against police who are enforcing immigration law if there are allegations that rights were violated.
What's your question? Go ahead.
The Sheriff's Association has correctly asserted that this bill will likely destroy all federal and state local partnerships. These partnerships are crucial in prosecuting fraud like Feeding Our Future, and obviously will be necessary in prosecuting the $9 billion in fraud moving forward. So I'll just plainly ask you, was it your intent to make these investigations harder, or was the goal just to undermine fraud investigations explicitly into the future?
And the answer is no. But what we have seen is that at least 14 federal prosecutors have resigned, including the lead prosecutor for Feeding Our Future. So this operation has not been about fraud. It's been made far worse by jeopardizing the current cases that we've seen, and that's a direct result about the actions from our federal government.
I think that the questions around the fraud in Minnesota for that particular program and others is only going to continue, not just in Minnesota, but all across the country. In Washington state, legislators there heard staff describe an expansion of what some would criticize as migrant sanctuary policies, dealing with where federal immigration enforcement can take place.
Engrossed Substitute Senate Bill 5906 prohibits early learning providers and school district employees from collecting information or documents regarding immigration or citizenship status of their students or their family members, except when it is required by state or federal law, or if it is required to administer a state or federally supported program. Relatedly, the bill directs the Attorney General to develop a model policy limiting assistance with immigration enforcement at early learning provider settings and facilities, and early learning providers are encouraged to adopt those model policies.
Washington state looking to join other states like Illinois and California with similar types of migrant sanctuary laws. And a different subject being tackled in Arizona, the staff there in their Senate, they explained a measure that would impact the liability of certain businesses when it comes to someone carrying a concealed firearm in that business.
The amendment stipulates that the presence of a concealed handgun does not create an obligation for the restaurant licensee or an employee of such to take reasonable steps to intervene or notify law enforcement officials in order to satisfy this customer safety requirement. The amendment also establishes that if a serious act of violence occurs on the premises, the licensee is not subject to license suspension if the act of violence results from the concealed handgun, unless the licensee or the employee knew the person was carrying concealed and served them liquor. The amendment further states that a restaurant license may not be suspended or revoked solely on the basis of a person carrying concealed on the premises. The amendment also establishes a presumption that a person carrying concealed is doing so in compliance with the law, and that no verification of compliance is required by a restaurant licensee or employee unless it is found that the licensee acted with gross negligence.
And down in Georgia, legislators working out the details of their state's spending plan for how to spend taxpayer dollars in Georgia. And they also discussed how they plan to give some of that taxpayer money back. Here's Georgia State Senator Blake Tillery.
Things to highlight that you did, I want to double down on. We do notice in this budget that's been proposed so far from both chambers that we're returning now over $2 billion to taxpayers. Their money, returning that to them in a time where affordability has been highlighted by both of our chambers as being the number one issue in our state. The Senate's position, as you have already stated, y'all had $27 million to start the funding of the state mental health hospital. The first time that had been done in 30 years. Looking across things, finding other lines, we've been able to help you more than double down on that line. And those are going to be the positions that the Senate wants to make sure we hold. We want to make sure that we're returning money to taxpayers, that we're keeping as lean a budget as possible.
Always interesting to see the different types of issues being tackled by state houses across the country.